Welcome to the Perfectly Flawed podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. For those that don't know you, can you give a little bit of an overview of who you are?
Hello, my name is Michael Goff. I am about to turn 33 this weekend at the time of the recording. I am Renee's coach of swimming. And what else would you like to know? I haven't coached for realistically that long. I never intended to be a coach, so I was very late at starting it. And so Renee has been there since I was winging it and learning what the hell swimming was and what competitive swimming actually meant. So I guess we'll just be chatting about that today.
Yeah, so I think going back to the start then, like you say, you haven't been in coaching very long. How did you get into coaching if you didn't really know much about swimming?
So I literally started learn to swim because someone I know said that it was really good money at the time that I started as a mature age student at uni. And so I did my course, I did my hours, and then from there, just sort of taught and picked up as many shifts as I could. But then I'm a very competitive person. And so if I was having any issues with any swimmers, I would talk to the coach, which was at the pool that I was teaching at, and get as much feedback from him as I possibly could. And then I eventually changed centres to a much bigger centre, which had a lot more opportunities. The club that I was at originally was very small, basically no low patronage uh, swimming pool. So the club itself was quite rural for Victoria. And so they only had 50 or 60 swimmers, I think, overall. And so for comparison at the moment, where I coach, we're up to 250 swimmers. So just a little bit bigger.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. And so I swapped centres where I was doing learn to swim. And because they have such a bigger swim school as well, they had other positions rather than just sort of a manager and learn to swim. And so I did a term of learn to swim with them. And then I was a term of a lead teacher, so going around assessing students and helping teachers to teach more because there's so many classes, they just need that extra support. And then there was a mass exodus at the competitive club when I believe all of the staff that were coaching at the time finished their uni degrees at the same time and they all moved on to other jobs at the same time. And so only the head coach was left. And so they did a mass hiring. And as part of that, they created a new squad for the swimmers who hadn't quite achieved the state times yet, but were starting to age out and not be junior swimmers anymore. And so they needed someone for that role, but the level that they were swimming at didn't necessarily require a coach who was super experienced. And so they sort of asked me and Hyde within to take that role. And so I found myself coaching all of a sudden. I had no idea what I was doing. And the idea of I was already doing learn to swim and I was doing the top levels of learn to swim. And then the concept of training for swimming was very, very, very new. And it took me a couple of months to get my head around the purpose and what they were actually trying to achieve as a competitive swimmer. But then I did that for like 12 months and then there was a vacancy and a need for the open group, the 18 plus swimmers, for a coach, and sort of we're in dire need, and I sort of got thrust into that role, and that role was a full-time position, and so all of a sudden I was now a full-time coach after learning on my feet pretty quick. So here we are, what, 5 years later.
Yeah, so I don't think you started at the club much before I started at the club, but it's probably about 12 months before you became my coach. So you've been my coach for a good 4 years now. Why have you stayed so long? Given, like, obviously you learned quick on your feet, but why have you stayed so long?
I think So I didn't go straight to uni. I was a mature age student. I didn't want to go from being in primary school as a student to being in high school as a student to being in uni as a student and then being in school as a teacher. I wanted to go out and actually do something different and not do teaching my entire life. And so I went out and did a heap of other random jobs, which always involved working with sort of, I guess, kids and always in the sort of fitness industry realm. And I really enjoyed that, but I bounced around a lot. I'm not very good at doing things I don't like. And so I enjoyed my roles while I was doing them, but I never found a role which I enjoy doing long term. And then when I did learn to swim, I enjoyed that because I just always had new students and you could always move them forwards and there's always progress. And then when I went to the competitive swimming, I guess I just got sucked into the learning for me. And then the more I got into it, the more I enjoyed the process of coaching. I enjoy just sort of I enjoy and hate the lifestyle at the same time. Like I have most of my days free. And so I coach before breakfast and I'll coach after school and then I'll have the day to myself. And so that's limiting because you do a lot less, I guess, during the week, seeing friends and stuff. But I enjoy the relationships with the swimmers. I enjoy tinkering with their technique and my programs in the gym and in the water and checking progress and checking back in and what do I need to do to get better for myself and what do I need to do to get better for them. Uh, and so I guess I kind of find that progress side of it pretty addictive.
Yeah, which makes sense. And I know that you have a football background rather than a swimming background, and you said before that you picked up swim teaching because of the money while studying. But why haven't you then switched back to coaching AFL in a sport that you found a love for?
Literally in Australia, I think swimming and gymnastics are basically the only paid roles for coaching when you're not at a senior level. So it's all volunteer. Otherwise, I definitely would have gone straight to like football coaching. I was obsessed with football. Football was my entire life up until probably 23, I reckon. And then after that, just got frustrated with the sport because of all my injuries. But I would have gone straight to coaching football if I could have, but there was no paid roles. So swimming was a paid role. Um, yeah, I literally only got into swimming for money, which is funny because realistically, as a coach, you're not doing coaching for money. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It sucks you in early and then you're sort of stuck.
So why are you still doing it then?
I just enjoy it. I enjoy the relationships. I enjoy the competitive side. Like I said, I sort of enjoy that lifestyle of I have a lot of time to myself and I can balance my workload really well. I have a lot of time to do things for myself, like learning to play golf this year, going to the gym and those other sorts of things. I got a lot of time during the day. So I enjoy that balance where I can manage myself a lot. I don't have to squish things in like the evening after my 9 to 5 job.
Makes sense. We'll come back to the football a little bit more later, but what things do you think you have learnt or that you can take from your sporting career or football specifically that you have been able to apply as a swim coach?
I think most of it's the mentality. Um, I Swimming itself is quite an individual sport when it comes to competition, but as we've sort of grown the squad, the most people are sort of there for the relationships and they continue staying as an open athlete for the relationships. And so growing up playing football in a team sport where there's at least 24 people on your team plus coaches, I've always grown up in that team environment, and I know how motivating for me that team environment was. And so I think just bringing that aspect into it and that mentality when it comes to training and knowing swimming is different with the physical side of training. Like you still need to push your boundaries, but the physical side of football, you have that. But I also come from you've, there's a time and place to put your body on the line. And what really hurts is being tired and out of breath actually hurting, or is me putting my head over the ball knowing that someone 60, 70, 80 kilos, 90 kilos, 100 kilos is going to come through the other way and actually make physical contact with me. What is actually scary when it comes to those physical limits. And so for me, I think my biggest thing I bring from football is just that mentality, knowing training is going to hurt, but as soon as you stop, it'll stop hurting. Whereas I retired because of injuries. And so when I stopped playing, I was still hurting. So I think that team aspect is also something that I really try and bring to the group. We do a lot of activities, probably not many this season actually, but in the past, we've done a lot of activities. And so that's a big thing for me, is trying to find those relationships with everybody and their relationship within a team and sort of that accountability within the team at training. Setting it up a bit more like that football environment when we're in the water.
Because obviously you had that aspect of it as an athlete, and obviously specific to football, being in a team environment, and obviously football is a team sport. And when it comes to swimming, the training aspect is a bit more of a team, as you said, compared to the competition side of it, where it's everyone for themselves. How can you facilitate, or how do you facilitate that as a coach, bringing that team aspect?
I think my style is actually just me talking a lot of rubbish all the time at everybody. And I'll include as many people in my rubbish talking as possible. We've experimented a heap with different team sort of initiatives, some sort of inter-squad competitions, which, depending on the time of year, we probably haven't found that format which is fit nicely yet. Mainly because swimmers move squads, competitions come around, time of years, we have breaks. Not everybody's competing in the same competition. So we're trying to do a lot of those smaller activities. As a club, we're trying to sort of if I start from from a club point of view, we're trying to find some more ways to get everybody together. So mix the squads a lot more, trying to have our club breakfasts, getting some of the senior athletes down to the junior competitions, sort of our intra-club competitions to sort of support them and sort of build those relationships and that sort of mentorship through. And then from our squad, as a sort of a coach, I think it really is just trying to be a mediator. I guess would probably be my biggest role. Other than me facilitating the nonsense and sort of dictating sort of when we need to switch on and when we don't need to switch on. I think me mediating between a lot of other swimmers is probably another big thing. When people are getting frustrated because one person's doing something or someone else is doing something, and it's like, well, I've asked them to do this, or they're doing that because of this, and this is happening because of this, and just making sure that everybody's temperament is in the right spot and making sure that everyone feels like we're all sort of in the same direction, in the same boat. Because there are a few, especially when you start getting to the open athletes, even in our squad, we have people training for a 50-meter swim, and we have people training to do the 5K open water. So making sure that people don't feel like they're missing out or other people are getting a different experience, understanding sort of where they all fit within the group and that inclusiveness, making sure that everyone's part of all the conversations and mixing that. I don't feel like there's anything too specific that I would do to make that environment. I think it really just comes down to me trying to talk rubbish and make sure that everyone feels comfortable in the environment and is included in the environment.
I have a two-part question.
Yeah.
The first part of the question is, how important do you think is having that team togetherness, I guess is the best way of wording it, to stay in the sport? How important is that for longevity in the sport? And the second part of that question is, how important is older athletes staying in the sport for as long as they can?
I think unless you are at the very top of swimming, I think the team environment is everything. I don't think you really necessarily get to the top without the team environment. Like you still need training partners and you're going to have your ups and downs. And so I think that's where the team really comes in. But I think if you're at the very, 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 very top and you're a very, very self-driven person, you may be able to sustain yourself individually while you're on top. But I think as soon as you have any setbacks or whatever, that's when you sort of get really exposed. I think the team environment is the thing that sort of keeps you coming back to training. Swimming is a very demanding sport. Like we train 8 times a week, 2-hour swims. Plus we have our 3 gym sessions in and around those swims. Plus you need to activate before the session. So start getting up to like 25, 30 hours a week really that you're committing to the sport. And then you guys are starting to juggle full-time work on top of that as well. So your week is huge. And I think if you don't have that social side and those relationships, that you're excited to go tell people about your day and what you've been up to and sharing those things and listening to my rubbish, then I don't think you're going to have with the long-term motivation to actually sustain yourself in the sport. I think in any sport you're going to have setbacks. So having those people around you or those moments where you don't feel like you can succeed, having those, I guess, partners around that are going through it with you, sort of showing you what's possible, those role models, people just to vent to sometimes, I guess, is probably going to be the thing that really keeps people in the water the longest. And what was the second part?
How important is it for like open athletes to stay in the sport?
Oh, I think it's like realistically, if there's no open athletes or swimmers can't see a path to an open program, then you're going to have a ridiculous dropout at that early teenage or VCE level. I think just them showing that it's possible and that you can still swim at a high level post year 12, and that it's possible to juggle year 12 and part-time work and swimming, is what's going to, I guess, ultimately strengthen the sport of swimming and any sport really. But I think it's also, as I said before, we're trying to get those mentorships a bit more, there's sort of a bit more relationships. And I guess swimming is very grueling. And once you start getting to that open level, you know, at the very top, you're only going to swim fast once a year. At sort of a bit of a lower level, you're going to sort of peak twice a year. And you're probably not going to PB unless you're peaking in there. And some people still might not peak for 4 or 5 years. So I guess that understanding that people stay in the sport as a junior, I think is going to be most important because you sort of have that relationship with the older. Because like you've grown up and we've spoken about it a lot where you were in a squad and you were very, very young, but you had some huge role models who were way older than you. You can see what's possible for the ability for them to swim fast. Yeah, when you got some of the juniors which are trying to break 40 seconds for their 50 freestyle, and then they see someone they know or someone they've spoken to, go 22, 23 seconds for a 50 freestyle. That's the inspiration. It's like, all right, well, what are they doing? How can I be like them? I think that's where the open athletes really come in. And if you start looking at the average ages of the national teams across the world, they're pretty old. I feel like recently it's got a bit younger. There's a huge crop, especially in Australia, of young swimmers, but we call them young swimmers. They're still 18, 19 years old. So I think a lot of those more established athletes that most people would know, like Emma McKeon, Kaylee McEwen and that, they're sort of mid to late 20s now. And you just don't get to that level, really, unless you've had the time in the sport. So longevity is the key for swimming.
And I think there's something that you said just before that I sort of want to pull apart a bit further. And I don't know if that's just my upbringing in sport or if it's a general consensus from a lot of other athletes. And based on people I've spoken to, there's not a very good understanding when you sort of get older and you don't PB. And as you said, you're sort of only peaking in quotations once a year as you get older, and you might not even PB within that time period. I feel like there's not really an education around that. It's sort of, as a young person, a young athlete in sport, you're sort of PBing and improving all the time, your body's growing, you're developing. And so it's just easier to progress quicker at that age. And then you sort of get to a point where you sort of plateau and you don't really see any improvement. I think that's when the dropout rate in sport is at its highest because you're not seeing improvement and you're putting just as much work in, if not more, and you're like, okay, what am I getting from this? And so everyone sort of leaves, but you need to stick around to sort of see the other side. I don't feel like there's a much of an understanding around that. From a coaching perspective, how would you educate an athlete on that?
I think I've had this conversation with a couple of people recently. I think just being straight to the point, I guess I'm probably pretty blunt about it. When you're growing, so once you guys hit puberty, you'll produce lactate. So your ability to actually have power and speed improves dramatically. Your limbs get longer. So you're just pure biomechanics. You have an ability to produce more force. Um, the body is capable of training at a much higher load. And so your capacity to actually train harder increases. Your muscles mature, so you get more strength. And so all of those things are happening. And so you're getting bigger and stronger and faster, whether you're in the water or not, training. So whatever sport you're doing, you're going to get bigger, stronger, faster just from hitting puberty. And so that plateau we're sort of talking about then is towards the end of puberty. And like girls have a huge attrition rate in sport across all codes. And it probably isn't a coincidence that as a whole, puberty finishes earlier for them. And so their dropout age is much younger. And so once you stop getting all of those advantages for free, I guess through puberty, it's all comes down to training. Like the only way that you're going to get bigger, stronger, and faster is the training side of things. And I think it gets really hard for those that peak really young, that hit puberty early, that fully develop really early, that rely on that physical maturation more than that sort of age. So they're very big and strong for their age. And so they're winning early, and then everybody else starts to catch up physically. And that's when it gets probably mental for them too. They may not have had the proper training when they're younger. Just that mentality side of things, I think, can be really big. I don't need to train very hard because I'm bigger and stronger and yada yada, which you sort of see from a few of them. And so I explained that to them is that they're getting bigger and stronger through puberty, but then there's going to be a time when the only way you can get better is what you do at training. And so those youngest athletes that I do work with, I try and get them to understand that as a junior, and we talk about it as a coaching team as well, we're trying to instill good habits early before it's too necessary, before they don't have a choice to train properly. And then from there, I guess it's just individuals, I think, with the goals. I think it can be really hard. I haven't had a lot of athletes, so I haven't had PBing for a while, unless they've had like a big injury. So I guess I haven't worked with anyone where I've had to deal with that too much. I've had athletes come to me who haven't PB'd in a very long time. I think that's very different because they haven't been under me for very long. So we're still sort of developing together. I guess I'd like to say I never have that happen where athletes don't PB under me, but at some point, people are going to get past their peak or lifestyles change. I think it's probably perspective too. If you're working full time, if you're doing a physical laboring job, your body's just going to be cooked. Like it's hard to be an athlete and full time work at the same time, which is just I guess the nature of sport and swimming. Time in the water just sucks so much time out of you. So it's very long winded and there's a lot of extra things in there. But I think it's just all comes down to they have to have good training habits when they're young, and understanding that at some point the only way to get better is to make yourself better.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to. I think it's hard to wrap your head around. As I said, it's sort of just this expectation of young, especially as a female, and I speak from my own perspective when I say this, you sort of not finish puberty, but like it's sort of plateaued a little bit around that 14, 15, 16 age. And you're like, okay, well, I'm still young. Like, I still feel like I'm growing. Everyone else is doing PBs. I'm not. And you don't understand because you're still training the same as what you were before. And for me at that age, I'd already stopped every other sport that I was doing growing up. And it was only to me, I had to make that decision. I was still training 9 times a week and I just wasn't getting anywhere. And for me to mentally wrap my head around that, I didn't understand. I was like, I'm turning up, my attendance is great and putting in the effort and I'm just not getting anything out of it. And I didn't for a very long time. So what advice, because you weren't my coach at that age, what would you have said to me in that moment?
I guess it comes down to, I guess, just perspective in what your goals are. I think trying to set some smaller goals. I think we do a lot of work for like 0.1 per second PB. So I think if you start to set your goals too far, that's when you can not feel like you're making a lot of progress. I think one of the things I try and stress quite regularly is looking at a lot of smaller things. Like, yes, you're not necessarily PBing yet, but if you look at it from a process-driven perspective, like I need to tick, say, 10 boxes in order to get a PB. At the moment, we're focusing on this. We're going to make sure this box is ticked. We're going to get better at this. We're going to get better at this. And I think realistically, mentally, we just got to focus on those things. I think that's all you can do with swimming, which is kind of a boring answer, but there's a lot of boxes you have to tick. There's a lot of things that you have to concentrate on to actually peak at your highest performance. And so it's just always being super analytical with those small things, that training and that consistency. And I think that's where we sort of come back to that mentorship. The older athletes can share that it's like, well, yeah, there are going to be those times where you plateau for whatever reason. Your body might change and the training you've been doing is just not going to be the correct training for your body anymore. And at the end of the day, it's a lot of experimentation between you and your coach. So you see a lot of those athletes that do move coaches. It takes a full 12 months for an open athlete, really, at least to get into a new program and for their body to adapt to new sorts of training. A lot easier for juniors if they just sleep well and eat the right breakfast. They can have their super juice and they're fine. They'll PB that day. But open athletes, it's a 12-month block that you're really putting in. So I think for that 16-year-old athlete that's plateauing, I think just keep, I guess the time is the goal, but the time you're swimming isn't the focus. I think the process. So the small things that you can control are what is going to be where your motivation is going to lie, and those teammates around you.
And then I guess I want to ask questions sort of specific to my swimming because I don't want to pull another athlete's experience. I don't want to speak on behalf of them. I sort of came to you as an adult open athlete who hadn't sort of PB'd in a while, and we've sort of established a relationship and a rapport over the last 4 or 5 years that you've coached me and experienced many different things that I'm sure not many coaches would know how to handle in terms of injury and setbacks, if not the average injuries. When you first started coaching me, what was that like, given that there wasn't many adult athletes that you had coached at that point?
Yeah, it really wasn't. When I started the group, there was you and two others who turned up to every session, and everybody else was sort of floating through special guesting, I guess, or maybe an average of 3 sessions a week. So I guess the athletes were just different. And I think for me as a coach coming into the open program, you guys have a huge wealth of knowledge compared to what I had when I started on your experience. And I guess what you would consider as normal for training. I come from a much more of a sports science and sort of that biomechanical, analytical side of things. So the biomechanics are its energy systems, and we're sort of working on one or the other or both, depending on what we're training. And so I guess coming from there and what my understanding of what you needed versus what you guys had all done in the past was completely different. I think I spent a lot of time consulting with other coaches and sort of running through programs, and that early PD was essential, which I was really lucky that I had that support. But coming as an open athlete and you guys knowing, yeah, about the sport and having the concepts already in your heads, I guess I was pretty green with that stuff.
Was it intimidating in a way?
I think so, but I think it's because I'm intimidating from the. I wasn't worried because I knew I would be fine. I just have that confidence that I'm smart enough that I'll figure anything out that I'm doing. I guess the intimidation was I had pressure on myself because as an open athlete, you've trained your entire life. I guess as soon as you transition to that sort of 18 plus, you're almost on a timer for how long your career is going to be going. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself because I didn't want you to be wasting your time doing things that weren't going to improve your swimming. I guess I found that probably the most intimidating part because I didn't want to be the reason why you weren't improving because I wasn't up to speed or I didn't have the knowledge. And so that motivated me heaps and kept me accountable for myself because I'd feel guilty. I did. I think I probably, well, intimidating. I probably felt guilty at the start, being like, shit, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, all right, what can I do? What do I need to do? What's the best program I can do for you? And how do I get you guys moving properly? Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing there. Yeah, it's not necessarily intimidating, but nervous for you. Do you want to be wasting your time?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think. Oh, no, go.
I was just going to ask, how did you feel when I came?
I don't know. I think I picked the club for a reason, and I think there was a multitude of factors of why I picked the club, and like the coaching aspect was only one side of it. And to be frank about it, I had no idea who you were when I started. I had no idea. Your name didn't mean anything to me when I started, and it wasn't. And sort of, our sessions overlapped with some of the younger ones in the beginning, and sort of would have brief conversations in passing. And it wasn't until you're my coach that I started to get to know you and the way that you worked and the way that you wrote sets and understanding your, I guess, goal of the set and the purpose and the reasoning behind things sort of probably took me a while to understand because I'd come from a very different background in the way things were delivered compared to you. And I've had a reasonable amount of different coaches throughout my career, and yours was quite different, not necessarily in a bad way, but it was just very different to what I was used to. And so it took me a long time to wrap my head around it. I think I was nervous in a way too because I just didn't know what to expect. And I think that there was nerves on both sides where we didn't really know how each other worked. And that probably took a little while just to figure out, but I think that would have been the case with anyone in a way. I think, well, I mean, from my perspective, I think we had a good communication set up in the beginning. Like, this is what I've done in the past. This is what I've had that has worked. This is where I'm at now. This is sort of what I want. And I think me probably being a bit upfront about those things probably made it easier for you to understand where I'd come from. You're like, oh, okay, this is where you're at now. We can do this to get you here. So I think there's probably nerves on both sides, but I think it was just really good that we were open in the beginning and communicating where each other were at and what we knew or didn't know.
Yeah, and it certainly helped that there was like 3 people turning up regularly. So the sessions were obviously very tailored to the 3 that are turning up to every session.
Yeah.
So I think that was good. But yeah, I think we did speak a lot about what you'd done in the past, and my very novice mind was kind of blown about when you told me a lot of the stuff you used to do, because it didn't make sense to a lot of what I'd been taught in my very short time. And so um, I guess my program was realistically quite a radical change from what you had done in the past.
Mm.
And I guess before your injury, we had pretty quick success in shifting the body. It's a bit more of a juggle at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think when I first started, it was like a 180 on the program that I'd done before. It was just a lot of long kilometers, like pushing that 70 kilometers a week to maybe half that kilometer wise. It was a lot more speed based, which I hadn't done a lot of. It was just,
And it showed.
yeah, I didn't have much variation in pace. It was just one pace, just go and just, I could just hold that for hours. But if you asked me to speed up, like nothing would happen. So I think that was probably why there was such a quick jump and probably a quick progression for an older athlete. And then I got hit pretty hard with an injury pretty early. And probably not the most typical, like a sort of shoulder type thing. It was a back injury, which we later found out I'd broken my back. And I don't think many coaches in any sport really would come across that, let alone in swimming. It's, I would say, reasonably unusual. How did that affect the way that you coach, or how did you wrap your head around that?
Well, it was a very like, I can't even remember the timeline. I remember having a sore back. I remember having sore ribs and sending you to the specialist as often as I could because I didn't know. I could guess on some things, but the root cause of things I couldn't diagnose. Not qualified to do that. And so initially it was costochondritis, so like inflammation of the ribs and swelling, which they said was to do with your back and where the ribs attach. So there was inflammation in that area. And so we had a drastically radical program to deal with that because you couldn't push through that once it was inflamed. And then that sort of went away for a little bit.
Mm.
And then you just had like a niggly back for a bit. And we were sort of, I felt like the costochondritis went for a long time. And we felt like, oh, we're on the other side of this. We could train normally again. I don't remember how long that lasted, but definitely does not feel like it's lasted as long as this has happened with your back and how long it's been sore for and all the stuff you've had to go through for that. Um, I guess for me, it's like coming from the sports science background. I was a personal trainer and I've studied PE, and so my understanding of anatomy and how the body works and where things are located is very good. And so I guess the process of us going through your back, I've understood bits and pieces, but I guess it comes down to the fact that I just could not diagnose that. I do not have the facilities, I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the expertise to have diagnosed that early. And so we were very reliant on specialists for all my information. What is appropriate, what's not appropriate. Um, Based on what we were given, I think my programs are very accurate. I think a lot of the issues were that they just didn't know you had a broken back. Um, and so there was no amount of good programs which were going to fix that. And so we were sort of, I guess, doomed for quite a while, sort of probably a good 12-month period where it was just band-aid fixes and experimentation of, okay, does this hurt? How much can we do? There's a lot of monitoring. I think at one stage we had to draw on like a breaststroke limit, like a certain number of meters and a certain number of meters at a certain intensity. And we were on the no pain program for a while. So for everyone that's listening, the no pain program was, we started really light and we would go to the point where it started to hurt. We'd make a note of that. And then the next session, we would sort of go up until that point. And if she was feeling okay, we'd probably leave that there for that session. And then if we can get 2 or 3 of those sessions in a row, then we would increase from there. And that worked for a while, but hindsight, it was probably the fact that we'd done less load, your body felt good because so the back could recover, but it didn't actually fix. It just wasn't as inflamed and aggravated. And then when we finally put the load on it again, as we incrementally increased week by week, it just got more and more exposed. So, yeah, a bit of twiddling our thumbs, and I think probably just frustration on your behalf as well, because like I'm trying to do everything I possibly can, but at the end of the day, we found out that there's just nothing I could have done differently because your back was already broken. Um, and so it's been a lot of a juggle. But I think for me, it's relying on a specialist. What does a specialist recommend? And then relying on my understanding of the human body and how it works. And then going through some, I guess, my own sort of swimming diagnostics. Like, all right, when you swim freestyle, these muscles should be working. All right, that technique that you're currently showing me is telling me that these muscles are probably doing the load. Let's change your technique to try and change the way your body's working. And seeing if we could, you giving me the feedback of, all right, I felt this when I did this, so then we change it. All right, when I did the second thing, I felt this instead. And it's like, okay, well, that sort of gives me an indication of where we were at. So there's been so many things on, which I could give you a lot more of a detail, but I think a lot of it was just you swimming from the shoulders and locking the back and us trying to loosen the back up, but it's obviously a pain response and locking up because it's broken. So we were never going to be able to loosen it up.
I think it was so hard because we were so limited with the information that we had, and there was specialists that didn't really know and sort of seeking out alternate opinions, and it was just the blind leading the blind for such a long time before getting a affirmative diagnosis of what was actually going on. Like, actually, it's broken. It's probably, no matter what training you do, it's probably not going to work until something sort of a bit more drastic is done to fix it. And I think it was just, it was almost like this iceberg, and we're sort of just dealing what we could see on the surface, and there was like majority of it under the surface, and we just had no idea. It was just wasn't visible. We had no clue what we were dealing with, and we were just sort of, as you said, just trial and error until we could figure out what it is, and we're relying on a physio who can only do so much. And it wasn't until I sort of, and with your encouragement, pushing further along sort of the medical chain as to who can give me an actual reasoning as to why I was in pain and why nothing was working. And then having surgery and then coming back from that. And when we're not past injury, we're still very much in it. How how did we manage from your perspective the post-surgery aspect of the injury?
Post-surgery was 100% reliant on what your specialist and physio were saying. And we were following, I guess, their directive with the load, because I had no idea what your back could handle after the surgery. And so I guess it was a lot of just floating for you, just being in the water and not doing a lot, but just being in the water, I guess, was number one. And then setting up our goals was probably the big thing. Like, all right, putting ourselves in perspective and shifting the mindset of, well, my PBs aren't going to be accurate because I've just had a major back surgery. And so I can't use them as my, I guess, goal setting. They're not my base anymore. My base needs to be, what did I do this morning? What did I do yesterday? What did I do last week? And sort of similar to what we were talking about before with the swimmers sort of plateauing because they're not growing anymore. It's like, all right, well, I was doing this yesterday. I'm going to continue doing this. Check back in myself. Has that improved? Has it not improved? And it's just a very long, drawn out process, which is pretty frustrating. But I don't know how to explain it without using my hands because I normally use my hands and draw. But when you start, if you think of a table, the first few weeks, you're only going to go up by like 1%, 2% at most per week. And so the start or coming back from any injury, and anytime you're sort of trying to improve the body, but you're starting from either, yeah, an injury or you haven't trained for a long time, that first 3 or 4 weeks is generally going to be your body just adapting to actually training properly again. And so your body doesn't actually change. It doesn't grow more muscle. You don't necessarily get fitter, but that first few weeks is when your body is just switching everything back on and I guess strengthening that Wi-Fi so that everything you do have is actually functioning at 100% of what you've got. And I think that's probably the most frustrating part for most people is that you don't feel like you're improving because nothing's changed. But the longer you go, what will happen is that very small gradients of improvement will get to the point where you're sort of back to full capacity and you don't have any restrictions. And then it can really shoot up really quickly. But I think it's that initial part where we're just floating through, which can be super frustrating. And it was frustrating for you. I know you struggled with it. And so we had a lot of talking about mindset and goals and me just talking nonsense to distract you from the fact that you weren't swimming very much or that you had to have extra rest. And so you weren't thinking about watching everyone else swim. And we're sort of back at that stage again, based on this new treatment for you, where we're starting again and you're going to be on this 4, 5, 6 weeks of what feels like nothing, but where you're back to that foundation level where we've got to just build the body back, which you're struggling with a bit.
I think, and we've had so many conversations, and we'll continue to have many conversations because it's something that I really struggle to wrap my head around. Is that mentally I'm still at PB, and physically I'm not even close. And I think it's tricky in a way because after surgery, you sort of expect coming off an injury that, as you said, the first few weeks there's not much progression, and then all of a sudden it sort of just ramps up and you get back to where I don't feel like after surgery we really had that. I think we're sort of stuck in that early weeks where there's not much progression, it's just plateauing. It just didn't really progress. There might have been small increments, but we didn't really get that quick acceleration of progression. It just sort of stagnated quite a lot. And with this new treatment plan, which we still don't even have a timeline on as to what that looks like and how it's going to progress, or if it progresses, but there's still a lot of unknowns. And that drives my brain insane, not knowing. I hate not knowing stuff. And I think it's hard because I'm still, as I said, that mindset of being this athlete where I was PBing. And because I never got back to that after surgery, that standard is even lower than what it would have been if I had started the injury now. And so that just feels so far away that I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, it's a lot. Um, I guess, yeah, it just comes back to what was I doing yesterday? What was I doing the day before? And it's boring and it's frustrating. It doesn't make it any easier to mentally cope. But I think if you don't check in mentally with that side of things, like, am I progressing in any way? Then I think that's where we feel stuck. Um, and we have to keep changing the goalposts, which I think probably is hard as well. Our expectation of what we can do and what we can't do. And then it also depends on how your body feels. It's probably, I think, with that, what did I do yesterday? What did I do the day before? It can be dangerous because you might just have a really good day. You do a lot, and then you probably overextend yourself. And then the next day, you're like, well, I can't do anywhere close to that. I'm regressing again.
Mm.
And so I think it's sort of like you've got to look at it from session to session, but then you've got to step back and in a perspective and be like, yes, there's going to be ups and downs, but am I trending in the right direction as a whole? And so, I guess reminding yourself too, like, why am I going through all of this? I think probably is the last thing because it has to be from you. Like I can encourage you, I can support you, but at the end of the day, you have to do it all, and I think that's hard as well because I guess you can only have support. I can't do it for you, which makes it hard because when you don't believe that you can do it, um, and when you have so much to do or so far to go, it can seem sort of impossible. But I think you just got to ensure that you're checking in with yourself. Why do I want to do this? What am I doing it for? What's the purpose of this program? Even if it feels stupid, I don't feel like I'm doing anything. Like, all right, it's leading into back to where I want, which I think is the probably the ultimate goal for you. Actually, got to go to swimming again.
Because I think my program process, or pre this new treatment, with that already felt like a regressed program, and this new treatment we've regressed from the regressed program. So it just is like, what are we doing? And there's no, for me, mental stimulation out of it. And I do rely on you as a coach to sort of provide that encouragement, because I think going back to that mentorship stuff that we're talking about before, I don't know anyone that's, one, had an injury that's lasted for this long, or two, an injury like this in general, ever. I don't know many athletes that have had a broken back and come back for it. Like, I think the list is pretty small, very minute people. And just people in general to sort of talk to about injury that's lasted that long. A lot of people sort of tap out at that point, or they've surpassed and progressed and moved forward and gone on to do other things, there's no one to sort of bounce off to say, hey, I'm really stuck on this. How did you get through this? Or I'm struggling with this bit. How do I work around this? There's no one to bounce those thoughts off. I feel very isolated when it comes to this injury because, as I said, there's no one to see that has done it before. I haven't seen anyone get to the other side. So it's hard to see that for myself and have that belief that there is the other side.
Is that the thing you're struggling with the most?
I think so, because I don't know that it can be done. There's no evidence, there's no one to show for it.
Yeah, it's pretty hard at the moment because we don't necessarily have a clear path. I guess they're still pretty exploratory with you as well, with the diagnosis. We got a pretty good idea of what's going on, but we're still testing some of these things. So I think, yeah, we were a regress program, and this is, and I think that's why we've been relying on those the specialists. Is that the program we were on was regressed based on the last, I guess, up to date information that we had. And we've sort of got some new information on your back, and so we're working on that. I guess the hard part is that if we get the information that we have now, and we sort of go through the process that they think we will, I guess the solutions are easy in the end. It just takes a lot of time and hard work to do it, which I think is probably all swimming all the time. Like most people know how to swim freestyle. That's not hard. The training and doing it while you're tired and fatigued and all the other stuff, your activation and dry run, that's the hard part. Doing it all the time correctly. And I think your back, based on this diagnosis, is the same. Not to try and make it sound dismissive, but the process is this kind of easy. Doing it is hard.
Mm.
Are there anything else that you're worried about with your back?
Oh, a lot of things. I think you only get one back. Like it's not something that you can replace or put in a cast. This is all I've got for my lifetime. And I think the questions of, am I risking too much now as an athlete for the longevity of my back? Things like having a family or just people have back problems the older they get. Will it survive those things? Am I risking too much now for it to not last for quality of life long term?
Yeah, we spoke about that maybe 2 weeks ago. You're probably in the best place to have a heart attack is at the pool because you've got trained professionals who are right there, right? I guess the same thing for your back. If our first goal is pain-free and just general longevity, the having a capacity where you can actually train is a lifelong skill. And you're probably going to be in the best environment for that right now because you do still have coaches and support around you, which can be better. And if we never get back to the competitive side of things, at least you are, I guess, in a position where hopefully your back is good enough for you to actually continue functioning, sit in an office chair for the rest of your life.
We're already halfway there.
Yeah, pain free.
What is the most frustrating thing from your perspective? One, I guess, specific to my injury, but just having injured athletes in general, because I'm not the only person that's injured in the squad at the moment, but obviously my injury has taken majority of our coach athlete time together.
Yeah, I definitely have inherited a lot of injuries. Our squad consists of quite a few people who have come back from serious injuries and got back into training as an open athlete. So we generally have one lane, 2 lanes, depending on the session of people that are floating through doing other things that have been edited. I think the frustrating thing is knowing, especially now, being a lot more confident in my program, is knowing well, the confidence that I believe we could be improving still. And I think your injury was probably frustrating because we were progressing. And even through those early days where we were dealing with costochondritis and stuff, and you were on a modified program, we were still PB, which is kind of silly, but to think of how much we had to juggle to get through that. And so I guess the frustrating thing for me is that I don't feel like we sort of got to where we could have. And I know we're improving, and I know I could have helped you get better. And then so with all my other athletes, I guess it's all right, I've got my main program. How quickly can I get everybody back on the program? Because it's frustrating sometimes. You sort of say a set, all right, everybody go do the set. And then you got like 5 people standing there looking at you like, okay, but what do I do? Which is hard because then if I'm, it's just how much time it takes. You know, if you look at it from all right, I have 20 athletes, I have 2 hours, so it's 120 minutes. All right. If I divide everything perfectly, everyone's getting like 6 minutes each per session. Of like individual, like I'm watching you and I'm only watching you. But as soon as someone has an injury, I can't just set and forget in the nicest possible way. I can't just give you the program, you go, and then I just wander around looking at all the athletes and picking up things and giving feedback where appropriate. I need to constantly checking in. Did that work? Did that not work? And then if it's not working, what edits can we make? And us having to run through those diagnostics of like, all right, well, what can you do? What can't you do? How much rest do I need? And then if the sessions are busy, all of a sudden the lanes aren't flowing very well. Everybody's been in traffic. For anyone that's not swimming, like you know what a learner driver does in a freeway. That's what the injured person does to our lanes while they're training. It just makes everything messier. And so it's how can I support the injured person to get the most out of themselves? And then how can I support the non-injured people and provide the program the injured people need without getting in, like realistically getting in the way of the non-injured people. And that's just a juggle all the time. Because I guess it probably sounds really bad when you're like, well, the injured person's in the way, but they are. We don't put the slowest person in with the fastest person wherever possible because it's not good for either of them. We don't. The faster person is not going to be able to train to the capacity they are able to, and the slower person getting run over by and stopping and moving out of the way for the faster person is also not going to get the program that they need for them. And so it is not a mutual benefit for everybody to be in that environment. So it's always coming back to how quickly can I get people back to where they need to be. They were still going to do up then, but concept was fine. I think.
Yeah, and I think that there was even a stage there for a while. I think particularly in the sort of costochondritis stage and even sort of a period of time before my surgery where it was how much pain can I tolerate and testing the limits of, okay, I can swim with a 7 out of 10 and achieve this. I can swim with an 8 out of 10 pain and achieve this. And it was how far can we push the pain tolerance to achieve what we wanted in the swim? And I know that was definitely sort of at the more important events where we're sort of at like, okay, I'm going to be in a 10 out of 10 pain. But and I remember you saying to me, it's like, well, you can be in pain and swim slow, you can be in pain and swim fast. Like you got to just sort of commit to the grind.
Yeah, well, because we were told at the time that you're not going to do any more damage. which hindsight is like, well,
Probably
we probably did
was.
so much damage. But we were told that you couldn't do any more damage by swimming. And at that point, you were sore basically all the time.
Mm,
And so, yeah, if that comes from you could have got in and just done the easiest freestyle ever, and your ribs would have been sore, but you would have been unhappy with the swim. And so that's where that comes from. It's like, well, you're going to be in pain regardless. So are we going to be in pain and satisfied with the result? Or are we going to be in pain and then frustrated that we put ourselves in pain and didn't achieve anything?
mm.
Um, which you PB'd, so
We still got alright results during that time.
yeah, which is stupid looking at it really. But coming back to your question before, that's where it frustrates me as a coach. It's like, well, we were dealing with all that nonsense and we were still PBing. You know, what could we have achieved if we didn't have any of those restrictions in the way? So it's hard. And last night I had two athletes in the younger group that I take. Both had injuries for a while now. Feels like it's been going forever. They're seeing people. It's frustrating me because well, I'm always having to deal with it. And it doesn't seem to be changing at all. And so I told them both yesterday, I need you, whoever you're seeing, to email me because this is taking too long. And I need to know what I can do to hurry this up because I'm impatient with these injuries because I know I'm not getting any feedback. And I guess as a coach, when you're relying on 14, 15-year-old kids to tell you what the specialist said and how their body's feeling, I don't like it because they're also at that age where they don't know what is. I mean, some of them struggle to tell me what soreness from the gym is versus I've done an injury pain. So relying on them translating what the specialist has said is not always optimal. So I always try and encourage any specialist to contact me directly so that I can actually talk to them and translate it because I think swimming is very unique. A lot of land-based sports would have a lot of overlap just because you're running, jumping, turning. That doesn't change. But swimming, it's really completely different. And so I need to have that conversation with physios to get them to understand what we actually require of your body and that you can't treat swimmers the same as a lot of other athletes, which is hard.
I think that's something that I've sort of pushed as well, is that you being looped in with the specialists that I've been seeing and sort of encouraging that three-way communication as to, like, you can understand the medical jargon just as much as I can, or the biomechanics or the exercise science sort of terminology, and understanding those concepts just as much as I can, or if not more. So having you linked in with them directly, they're not having to change the wording of the diagnosis or the treatment plan, and being able to create a treatment plan between you guys and then just handing it to me and saying this is what the plan is, has sort of been beneficial as well.
It just speeds it up because I see you 8 times a week and sometimes they see you once a fortnight, once a month.
Mm.
So it's a lot of time for me to make decisions about your body. You know, if they see you once a month, that's up to 32 times I see you in a month of training. It's a lot of time for me to make decisions. There's a lot of micro decisions that I need to make about something that I don't necessarily know the best about. And so I guess for anyone else out there that's coaching or in that sort of position, I think just making sure you're on task with the specialist is huge. Getting it done early. If anything hurts for more than 2 days, they need to get checked out. Nothing should hurt for more than 2 days. Yeah, makes it hard. How have you tried to like manage all the emotions with your back?
I don't know if managing is the right word, because I'm not convinced that I have, and I'm not convinced that I have in the past or even now. I think it's a very what's the word I'm looking for? Not fun roller coaster, not enjoyable in the slightest. I think it can go from you have a good day, like finally something's working, and then you rock up the next day and you're like, it's all gone out the window. without, pardon the French, what the fuck happened between today and yesterday that it's gone so wrong. But I think just in swimming in general, like particularly from my perspective, breaststroke can be very temperamental. It can be good one time and then the next day it's terrible, and you're like, well, I haven't done anything different. I don't understand. And I think that's very much the same as the injury that I've got. Is that sometimes something works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that comes back to the information we've been given hasn't quite translated to what it's actually like in reality. There's sort of, the specialists are talking from one perspective of like, this is what it looks like from a scan and blah, 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 blah. And then we get to the reality of actually putting that information into practice. And it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense at all because it's nothing what it's actually like in the pool. And that's frustrating. And I don't think I've handled the emotional side of it very well. And I don't know what the solution to that is. I think I've been told that I'm doing everything that I can, and I sort of I'm like, well, that doesn't seem to be working, or it's just not enough. So I think you talking rubbish at me is helpful, to sort of distract, even if it's not fixing anything, if it just takes my mind off it temporarily for the 30 seconds or whatever it is that I'm at the wall, or sort of that transition in activation or between gym and swim, just to just not think about it. I think it's very mentally fatiguing, constantly like, okay, what can I do for this? What can I change here? Is this going to hurt? Is this not going to hurt? How much pain is good pain? Is any pain good pain? Is it just because it hasn't been used much and it's just activating? Or is it, am I doing damage? Is it just fatigued? And understanding the different types of pain, constantly thinking about every single movement that you do and what sort of effect that has, if it's good or bad, and then making a decision from that. It's exhausting. That's a job in itself. And I don't know how to manage that because it's at a point, and it has been at a point where that's not just in the pool. That's, can I go for a walk today with a friend that's going to be an hour? I'm like, okay, in an hour I can walk 5 kilometers. Can my back handle that? Are we going to stop? Can I stand in one spot for this long? Is that going to hurt? What can I do instead? Is there a spot where I can sit down? Can I rest? Can I do this? If I'm going out for a concert or I'm going out shopping with a friend, can my back withstand that activity? Those sort of things, it's, as I said, it's exhausting, and it has been on and off between making those decisions in the pool and outside of the pool. And yeah, I don't know is the answer. I don't know how to manage it. If I had a solution, I would. If there is a solution, I'd love to know what it is.
I also have all those questions, but I'm relying on you to communicate the answers. So that's where we get stuck sometimes.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the time I don't have those answers.
Yeah.
And that's when we sort of hit a wall. And you're like, well, I can't help you if I don't know. And I'm like, well, I don't have the answers
Yeah.
either. So we sort of come to a halt.
Well, that's it. I can't mark an essay where you didn't write any words. So
Yeah.
that's where, when we get stuck, it's like, well, I don't know. And that's where the diagnostic comes in. But I think probably more frequently recently, we've got to the point where it's like, well, I can't do any more diagnostics because I guess the pool, if you think of it like we had 30 things which we could try at the start, we've eliminated a lot of those things. And a lot of those things are reliant on you being able to do, say, tier one. We can't do two, tier three, tier four if you can't do tier one. And so if we've eliminated one thing, it's like, well, we're definitely not going to be able to do those other things. So our box of options is pretty small at the moment.
Mm.
And we can go through those boxes pretty quick.
Yeah. But then there's sometimes where I can do elements of tier one and not other elements of that. But then I can do some of tier four and nothing in tier three. But I can also do two. And then it's like, okay, well, what the hell is going on? And it's just a bit messy.
Always. Which is hard. Hence what you just said.
Yeah. Mentally fatiguing. I think from both sides. I think probably from a coaching's perspective, it's, I mean, there's an element of you being able to switch off after the session, but then there's an element of, okay, well, what are we going to do for the next one? And already pre-planning how we can better manage the next one. So there is still that element of being switched on and that mental fatigue of thinking about those things. It's still happening outside of the pool, but I think it's just a little bit different. There is an element of you can switch off because it's not your body.
Yeah, I can get pretty obsessive, so hence why I said at the start that I've taken up golf this year. So I don't engage. Basically, the nature of, say, coaching is that I start work at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then I'm finished by 8, and then I can go home and I could study and plan and analyze endless. There's no limit to how long I could do that. And then I could do that all day, and then I get to 5 o'clock in the afternoon where I'm coaching again, and then finish at 7:30, and I'll get home, and all of a sudden it's been like a 15-hour work day. And so I have to switch off in between. Otherwise, I will be blowing out my weekly hours in the first 3 days and then still working the rest of the week. And so for me, I think I probably there was a lot more when I started. I didn't have the luxury of like, oh, I'm going to go do something else. Like, no, I need to learn. I need to catch up. I need to understand what the hell I'm supposed to be doing. And so early on, I didn't switch off. And now I can whip my plan up the next 4 weeks in 2 or 3 hours, and I'm confident it's pretty solid. And then I'll just spend half an hour, probably daily, just checking in, going back over things. I find the longer I stew on it, I'll always make edits. So if I plan too far ahead, then I don't know what 20 times handling things would be, but that's what would end up happening. And so for you with your back, obviously you're feeling the pain all day. But I try and disengage ASAP from all swimming related things because I'll just get burnt out as a coach. And you guys need me on all the time as a coach. It's like that's my job is to be on. It doesn't work for you guys if I'm flat.
So how, like, obviously that's important from your perspective, and from any person, regardless of what they're doing, it's important to have moments of being able to switch on and switch off. As an athlete, I think it's tricky, and I mean, I haven't figured out how to do it, and I'm sure there's many other people that would agree with me when saying that they haven't figured it out either. Is you have to be switched on when you're at training. Obviously, there's a reason and there's a need for that, and you have to be on constantly for that duration of the session. But there's still an element of being switched on throughout the day with certain things like, okay, well, I need to make sure I'm fueling because I've got another session this afternoon. I need to fuel, I need to rest, I need to do those things. But how do you be switched on to accomplish those things throughout the day whilst also being able to switch off and not think about it so that when you turn up to the next session that you're ready to go again?
I think for me, it's more of just designated time. Like I have to eat anyway, and so I find for me, like as an athlete, I currently still eat a lot of food. I'm not a small person, and so I eat a lot of food all day, every day. And if I'm doing my own training for my own health, I eat even more food. I'm just insatiable, really. So I think from an athlete's point of view, it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna eat my meal anyway, and so it doesn't. I don't need to switch on for swimming. I think if you're winging it all day, every day, then you're shit out of luck. There's no way you're not going to be able to disengage. I think if you look at, say, someone who wakes up, goes to training, comes home, what's in the fridge? Oh, I'll eat that. Oh, what's for lunch? Oh, I need to fuel up. What am I going to have? Got to go through the cupboard. Then you go to the shops or whatever. That's a really long process. It's a lot of thinking all day, every day. Whereas if you looked at someone who, say, did all their shopping on Sunday, meal prep Sunday afternoon, they train in the morning, they come home, they eat the snack, which is already organized. Then they do whatever else they need to do. They go to the fridge, they eat their lunch, which is already organized. You've lost all of that planning and running around, which I think should realistically help you switch off. It's because you're not planning, you're not thinking, like you're not panicking. it's already done for you. And then I think it's probably switching to other things like, all right, well, I think we're probably more aware of it as a society now. Like, all right, well, what other things am I going to do during the day that need to get done? Um, and trying to find a way to engage in that activity. And I think that's where, for me, setting time limits, setting alarms is really important. I know the Christmas holidays just gone. I had a week from Christmas to New Year's where I was basically just off and by myself. And so I set an alarm for 1 hour of adult time. And that was literally all I would do. And so adult time consisted of cleaning the house, doing the dishes, mopping the floors, meal prepping. And if I ran out of hours for that day, then that was done. And so I was very strict on it. There's a few times where I didn't finish the dishes, and so I just pulled the plug and half the dishes sat there until the next day, or I didn't get to my meal prep that day, so I just Uber Eats everything for the entire day. And so for me, I think I'm very good at compartmentalizing that. It's like, oh, well, yeah, the house is messy, but I'm now just sitting on the couch watching the cricket, and I'm happy doing that for me. And so I think I'm good at engaging in what I'm doing and setting time limits for the activities I need to do. So that's probably my biggest advice as an athlete. As someone that played football, I thought about it all day, every day, but the performance was different. Training, you didn't get measured like you do it. Swimming. Swimming, we get 8 sessions a week. There's a clock on all the main sets. And so your training is very similar to the actual performance and the race. Whereas football, training. You're not getting measured. Your ability to train helps to the performance on the weekend, but it's not, you're not necessarily getting an indication of how long you're going to play football on the weekend. There's too many variables. Whereas swimming's such like you're in this lane, you're in a lane when you race. I'm still swimming the same stroke, in the same water. And I think that's where it can get very anxious for you guys. And so finding hobbies, finding work, managing yourselves, I think is probably tricky, but it's a skill that you just have to learn, whether you want to or not. You've got to find a way to disengage. I think it's probably just, probably people would talk about being in the moment. I think it's just knowing that it's like, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch a movie now. That's what I'm doing. And that's okay. I don't need to feel guilty because I'm not planning, I'm not rolling, or maybe I do rolling. Maybe I combine those activities. Maybe I'm a bit sore from training, so I'm going to watch a movie, switch off mentally, but I can also do some rolling, do some stretching, make my body feel good at that time while I'm just vegging, rather than watching TV, knowing you're sore, and then letting that anxiety get on top of you. It's like, well, I should be doing something about it. And then an hour and a half goes by while you watch the movie and scroll on TikTok and you haven't done anything about it. I think that's where that mental side of things can be fatiguing.
Yeah, I know we've had a lot of conversations about that too, because I found that I was engaging in swimming a lot outside of or off pool deck, in whether it's reading a book about someone else's experience or reading up just about my injury and trying to find out more information about what's going on, or listening to a podcast, or okay, well, can I be doing this exercise, going to the physio, seeing the specialist. There was a lot of thinking about swimming specifically, not just about my back, but just swimming in general, about, okay, well, how can I do this next session? What about this? Can I try this? Oh, well, I spoke to my physio and they said this, and then, communicating that information to you, like, oh, well, the physio said this, can we try this at training? Or there was constant thoughts on trying to find an activity that wasn't going to affect my back, which was a very, very minuscule list of things that pulled me away from swimming. And I envy the fact that you can just sit on the couch and engage in one activity, because my brain does not allow me, and my anxiety does not allow me to just actively engage in one thing at a time. There is constantly other things going on at the same time.
My one activity might be I'm relaxing. And so that relaxing might be I'm watching a movie, I'm playing a turn-based game on my computer while I'm also playing a game on my phone. So it's definitely not one activity, but I guess the concept of the activity is like, this is my downtime, I'm doing whatever I feel like. And I'm going to engage in whatever I feel like. I know for myself when I'm active, that helps heaps. I can't do that very well when I know I have been active. So that's probably my trigger. It's like, all right, well, I've ticked my boxes. Like food's been prepped. I've been physically active, and I know my programs have been written, and then everything else I can schedule around that. I think if those boxes are ticked, then I don't feel guilty or I don't feel pressure to complete anything, and then I can manage everything else in my own time. That I've used the diary a lot better this year. So rather than writing a to-do list, I've been writing a to-do list, but I've been writing directly into my diary, and I've been writing it directly into the days in which I'm going to get it done, which I found so much better. Because I think you'd seen it once before. I had a piece of paper, which was just my to-do list paper, and it was about a month old, and every single thing I needed to do was always written on that list. And so it was just this messy, scribble, crossed out piece of
It
paper.
was the most overwhelming list I've ever seen in my entire life.
So it was just a month of activities. But the same thing could be on there 7 or 8 times. It's like, oh, I need to write my set today, and I'll just put that on my list because I'm very forgetful, and something might just slip my mind. And so if I think of it, it went on the list, then I just crossed as many things off and got my dopamine hit as I could every day, knocking off all those to do things. So some days they'd be very successful. Some days there'd just be 10 things on there that I look at and I'm like, I can't bother doing that, can't bother doing that. And it's so unproductive. So I found that, all right, designate days to do those sorts of things. And it stops me from overwhelming myself with my to-do list. So moral of the story is I think it needs to be planned. You can't disengage by accident. I think that's your key.
Yeah, that's fair. I know you said, don't think about a pink elephant the first thing. That's why it's a pink elephant.
Yeah.
Can't not think about something. You have to actively do something else.
Yeah. And if you're, well, I used to call them like football tragics, those people that are just obsessed with the sport. Like you can be obsessed with swimming, but it's, I guess, being purposeful in the activity that you're doing. Are you obsessed because you're looking for things for you to do? Or are you just obsessed because you're really keen to see what other people are doing? And what's the purpose of you engaging in that activity? I think it's probably the thing. It's just having a purpose. I think if you're winging it, then it's just a lot of wasted energy.
Mm.
Hence, with if you're not meal prepping all week, and then you're worried about, you're worried about your nutrition for the week, and you spend so much time every day planning meals, and then getting food for those meals and such, and you're just wasting time.
How much do you think you have learned as a coach? Obviously, you learned probably a lot about the spine and the anatomy of the back, but specifically about managing injuries in general and what you have learned in terms of making adjustments and amendments to sets or those type of things. How much do you think you have learned from that?
I feel like I've developed a heap of protocols myself. I think you could probably attest to it. I'm very good at guessing where it's sore. I think a lot of athletes have found that out either as well. They're like, it hurts when I do this. I'm like, well, I'll put my thumb into this muscle. Does it hurt? And they'll squeal and collapse in pain because I was correct. So I think that side of things has just come from experience of so many people being like, it hurts when I do this. It hurts when I do this. And eventually it's just common. I think the biggest thing that annoys me when physios are like, "I'll just take 2 weeks off." So if they take 2 weeks off and they rest, then yes, they feel good. because that muscle's not under any load. And then we're just going to put a load back on it straight away. And guess what? It's going to get sore. So I think for me, it's knowing how to keep things active and get things moving without necessarily aggravating whatever is sore or tight, and just getting athletes to understand how to, because like sore and tight muscles is the most common, especially to the neck and shoulders. And I guess just teaching athletes how to diagnose that protocol and how to switch off the muscle that's sore, how to activate the opposite muscles to create some balance for themselves. And then that diagnosis in the water. Oh, what can I do? How can I keep myself moving and active without aggravating whatever it is that is sore? I think sending people to get diagnosed straight away. You know, if there's sharp pain, getting them to check that out straight away, because there shouldn't be any sharp pain in anything that we do. If there is, then you've either tweaked it or it could have just moved weird, but I don't like sharp pain. And then, yeah, if it's been 2 days, something's sore for 2 days and niggly or aching for 2 days, then at least get checked, because we shouldn't have it. Even muscle soreness in the gym, they should be fading after 2 days at the very most. And that's only if you're going really heavy. So I think it's just straight away, not hesitating on that sort of stuff. But go and get it checked out. Go get the specialist. Hurry this up. I don't want to be niggling. I don't want to be dealing with it any longer than I have to. You don't want to be dealing with it any longer than you have to. I don't want to hear you telling me about you dealing with it any longer than we have to. Because I think you guys forget sometimes. Yes, you're frustrated because you're dealing with your injury, but I'm also dealing with everybody else's injury. And so there are some sessions where that's all I deal with, where we are just juggling. I'm going back and forth, just give a thumbs up to everybody that's swimming. Like, yep, you're still swimming, that's awesome. And then I'm just bouncing between people and modifying sets. And so, like, those sessions are frustrating, but I know it has to be done. I think that's probably where I keep my brain engaged with that stuff. Yeah, so I think the biggest thing I've learned is probably just how to diagnose those protocols early, and then I guess having some routines on how to keep the athlete in the water and keep the athlete training without causing more damage, which has taken a while. A lot of trial and error. And unfortunately, I only get better at it because you guys are injured. So, but like I said, you guys are inheriting these injuries. I'm inheriting these injuries as I inherit you guys. You guys aren't getting injured because I'm hurting.
You're welcome for the extra knowledge, by the way.
Yes. I need that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you've learnt through having injury? Anything to do with the mindset or how you go about looking after your body?
I think growing up, I was pretty naive as to my body just did what it wanted to do. Like, it just did it. I didn't really have to put much thought into looking after it per se. And I remember one particular coach telling me, "Oh, like, look after it while you're young, because it's not going to be like this forever." And I was like, "Oh yeah, whatever." I didn't really take what they had said on board, because I just like, well, it's working, so it must be fine. And I wouldn't really foam roll, wouldn't really stretch, didn't get much of an education around it, and so I just didn't do it, and never really had an issue for majority of my time up until the age of about, I don't know. I don't think I really had any major injuries growing up. A few niggles here and there where you sort of modify load for about a week or two and then you're good to go again, but didn't really interfere with everything or anything, I should say. I didn't have any injuries that interfered with a specific meet or anything long term, sort of until my ribs and my back. So I was pretty lucky in that sense that I didn't have to worry about it. So I think it's only now that I've had to be more conscious of it, but I think I've had to be more conscious as I've become an adult and stopped growing is that my body doesn't bounce back like it used to. I think as a kid, you're like this really new elastic band and you can pull it and stretch it any way you want and it's going to bounce back pretty quickly. And as you get older, it's this old, tired elastic band that's been put out in the sun for too long. And if you pull it too hard, it's actually just going to snap and it's not going to go back. So I think they're probably the big things, but I think I've learnt them the hard way. I don't think I've had an education around injury necessarily. Again, not being exposed, and I don't know if that's just naivety or just I just wasn't surrounded by it. But I didn't actively seek it out either. So maybe there's a combination of both. So I think a lot of the stuff that I have learned has been the hard way. It's okay, well, this is all. And I think a lot of the education has come from you and from the specialists and physios that I have seen of no, we need to rest. Rest is just as important. Um, there is such a thing as under recovering, probably more so than overtraining. Quite often that's where injuries occurs from under recovery, not overtraining. So taking the time and how important sleep is and how important eating is and what you're eating at certain times of the day. And I still think there is a lot more that I need to learn because I don't think I always manage my body or the things that I'm putting into my body or the things that I'm doing for my body in the best way. And I think that is through a lack of education. But I think now that I'm older, I probably have to take a bit more ownership and actively seeking that out for myself. So I guess instilling those habits early, I didn't have that. And so I had to learn the hard way to figure it out. And I still don't have it figured out.
I think one of the big things is that me growing up, I played football, and obviously they're all volunteers, so it's a lot of parents as our coach growing up through the juniors, and it's not until you get to either a representative level or like an open level where you have um, money in the club to actually spend on the athletes. And so my knowledge of training was basically a couple of push-ups in summer, a couple of sit-ups, and a shitload of running. And that was my education on how to look after my body. Whereas we're also a very big club in Victoria, you guys have access to so much information and so much, I guess, knowledge on how to look after your body that there just isn't in juniors football. Like if you look at a junior athlete now coming through, like a 9, 10, 11-year-old at our club, the amount of resources they have access to is unreal compared to what resources I had all the way through my football career. I was never at a club that spent a lot of money on players, and so we didn't even have a gym. I didn't do gym for football until I went out of my own way and paid for gym. So I think that education side of things is really big because there'd be so many small community clubs that don't have any of that information.
Yeah, but I think there's an element of that in every sport, and obviously we're coming from two different sports, and there is a bit of there's a enough age gap that there is a difference in information at that point in time or in our respective sports. But I remember in the sort of mid teenage years where it was okay, we're on break from swimming and we were told, please stay active. Like, don't do nothing. You need to stay active. And we weren't informed that, okay, well, we haven't really done much running because all we do is swim. Like, swimming is the only sport that we sort of do. So if you're going to go out and run or cycle or do a sport that your body is not used to, it is going to have a different impact on your body. We weren't educated on that. And so there'd be a pretty large portion of the squad come back injured with proper injuries. Like they were coming back and having to have cortisone injections because they went out and said, yeah, I'm fit, I can run 10K when they've haven't done much running before. But it was, you need to be active. And that was sort of drilled into us that yes, this is a break, but you still need to be active. Like don't necessarily go for a swim, but you need to be active the entire time of the break so that you don't come back and fall into a heap. Don't sit on the couch and your muscles and all your limbs just go limp. Like you need to be actively involved in moving your body. But we weren't educated in how to do that because we didn't have any other sport. And if you're saying we can't do the sport that we know how to, going out and as I said, I know someone that went and they started running 10K, every second day who hadn't done much running and ended up with cortisones in their ankles because they stuffed up so bad because they were so like, I need to be active. So I think there's that lack of information probably falls into a lot of that younger years. And you just think that you're sort of invincible, that your body will just withstand whatever you throw at it.
Yeah. Moral of the story is juniors just listen to what you tell them, do it.
And that's what we did. And we thought we were doing the right thing, but it didn't work out.
Do your foam rolling. Look after the body. And that, it comes back to one of the first things we said was from a junior level, it's learning to train properly. Like that's what we're looking at. You're still going to get your benefits from just growing and general maturation. So learning to look after yourself and the good habits, I think, are pretty crucial. And so that education around those things is something that we push. I push as much as I can, as often as I can. Some stuff sticks, a lot of stuff doesn't stick. It's very obvious which athletes look after themselves and which ones don't. So at the end of the day, I can't. I think you probably take it too personally at the start. It's like, but they either want it, they have to want it. I can't want it for them. So I can. I'm a resource, but I'm a finite resource. I can't spend all my energy on people that don't want to do it, which is hard. Probably the hardest thing as a coach, especially when they're wasting their talent. Ugh.
Yeah. I'd love to ask a question on rest. Sort of briefly touched on it then, in the sense that I think, again, lack of education. When we were on breaks, it was stay active, or, for every day that you have out of the pool, it takes that much to get back to where you were, and then if you want to progress. So if you have a week off, it's going to take you 2 weeks to get back to where you wanted to be before. And that was sort of always drilled into me. And so growing up, I didn't really take the breaks as breaks. I would still be swimming because I was paranoid that I'd come back and fall into a heap and not be able to get back. And so I know when we've had breaks and then you like know you actually need to rest and not be actively involved in swimming as much as what you were before, you need to actually just take time off. And if that's spending the day not doing much and sort of lounging and not do anything, that's okay. Go for a gentle 30-minute walk rather than say go for a 2-hour swim, doing those things. And then I'd come back and I'd fall into a heap and be like, what the hell is going on? And that's because my body had never experienced a break before. How do you think then the lockdowns have shaped our view on rest, given how our squad and just our club in general have come back and came back on and off, particularly with the several ongoing lost count of how many lockdowns we went in and out of, and then even looking at the top athletes and how they performed in Tokyo, because there was a period of time where everyone was on break without a choice. How do you think our views of rest have changed because of that?
I think the understanding of like one of those things where it's like, all right, you've had a day off and it's going to take 2 days to catch back up. I think a lot of those understandings come from the time where more was better, where people were just absolutely flogged. And yes, if you're getting absolutely flogged every day and you have a couple of weeks off, then you're going to come back and it's going to be harder to get flogged. And so I think the modern training techniques and understanding of energy systems, I think the rest has really changed because it's understanding progressive overload and that adaptations that the body goes through under that stimulus, I think has changed heaps. And I think with just a general busy lifestyle now, it's all right, well, how can I get the most out of the body with the least amount of time and effort? And so rest comes in because there's you got a glass of water and you just keep pouring more water in it, it's going to spill, right? And you're going to waste that water. And training sort of gets to that point where if I keep hitting you with stimulus, at some point your body is going to be unable to recover from that stimulus, and that's when we get the injuries. And so your body only adapts if the stimulus is appropriate for your level, and that stimulus is slightly over your current level, and your body is able to recover from that and repair from that stimulus. And so understanding we have set breaks, and having those breaks at those times, I guess the difference is that it's very much factored into our training program that you will be coming back from a break. And the breaks are at a point where you have sufficient time to be able to still overload and get back to where you need to be. And I think COVID, they're doing a lot of research on it at the moment, because I think a lot of people didn't get enough, obviously, activity through that time, but they were still able to come back and get back to the level at which they sort of were before, a lot quicker than I think most people would have anticipated. And so they're doing a lot more research that athletes could probably have a lot more rest than was, I guess, probably well thought of already. I don't know, swimming's changed a lot. Like when you start looking at the sprinters' workload now, their training stimulus is pretty low and their intensity is really low. The guys just floating or they're swimming really fast. There's no in between, which we sort of introduced to your program initially, which you were very raw to. But I think it's that balance too, mentally. If you're grinding all the time, that's mentally fatiguing. And I think that ability to rest is when you can mentally switch off, which I think is just as important. Because we ask a lot of you as an athlete, especially in the water. You've got eight training sessions a week. Football, I trained twice a week, like for 20 years. In the last 6 years, I had so many injuries that I just spent all week rehabbing. I didn't even train. So, I didn't train for 6 years. So, it's a lot of a different load compared to what you do. And so swimming is very time demanding on that stuff. And their bodies go through a lot of load and a lot of stimulus. And so us manipulating that stimulus so that you can still get that overload, and also still sufficiently recover is obviously a big balancing act. But I think to sort of answer your question, for me, managing the rest and factoring that into the program and teaching you guys about what we need to do. Because when you guys are on break, I send out some programs because I know that some people can't switch off. And we spoke about it, maybe not this Christmas, the Christmas before, but swimming is therapeutic for you as well. And so, yes, we're having a break from swimming, but we're having a break from competitive swimming. I think that's probably the stimulus for you. And so you can go in, just float for an hour, whatever feels good, that's fine. You feel really good because you've been in the water. You've always been in the water your entire life. And as like I said, it's what is rest. And I think for you, being in the water and that mental rest, because you're not doing the competitive style training versus just floating through because it feels nice in the body and it feels nice to be in the water, that is still rest for you because we're not overloading your systems. I guess lockdown was probably a really good opportunity because we still did like 8 1-hour Zooms a week because that's what the squad wanted to do to stay connected. They wanted that constant catching up and trying to keep our schedule as regular as possible. And so we did a lot of programs where I give you guys some cycling programs, some running programs, and still try to teach you guys how to overload, just like I would with a swimming program, but overloading with the dry land work, your band work, body weight work, running work, swimming work, cycling work, and trying to make sure you guys didn't do too much running for that exact reason, because you guys are terrible runners.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, well, specifically, we got you guys trying to cycle as much as possible. So yeah, so I think rest is essential. I think as much mentally as it is anything else. And then those I need you to have rest, but I need you to have rest at certain times, which I think can be really hard coming up as a junior, understanding that no, you should be sore and tired. I'm trying to make you sore and tired. And the more sore and the more tired I can get you without you collapsing, the better your rest will be. That's when all your adaptations happen, and that's where all your improvement comes from.
Mm.
But if I can't make you sore and tired, then you're not going to.
I think that's probably another thing that I find really hard with the injury is that swimming has been therapeutic and it has been in some capacity a mental switch off from life, but then I also need a switch off from swimming. So I haven't had that swimming to mentally switch off with the injury, that I don't have that capacity to do that anymore and just get in and just float and just do what feels good. Like that has been taken away with the injury as well. But I wanted to ask and sort of putting you on the spot because I didn't prep you on this question at all. So good luck. What do you think specifically with me, and there's a bit of selfishness within asking that, but has been the highlight of coaching me slash proudest moment of coaching me?
I would say probably we were talking about that. We talked about it sort of before that when we were dealing with the costochondritis, and you swam at states at the long course states, but you made the final with 200 breast. But I wasn't there. I was out, and I was watching. I was watching it on my phone while I was out. I don't even remember what I had. I think it was like a birthday party or something like that. And so I think it was that. I think because it's been such a long season for us, um, and you've done a small PB in the morning, and then you made it to the final, and then you got touched out for fourth, like right on the wall. But it was a huge PB that you swam in the afternoon, like that night as well. I think it's probably just relief as a coach. Like, holy shit, we did it. Like, PB, like, we can just, I could just switch off after that. I think because I used to know how hard it was for you to get to that point. Um, I just say it was selfish for me because it was satisfaction of like, yes, I got to that point. We did it. We made it. And probably just the relief as well. So I know how hard it would have, how much it would have hurt based on our training. So I think that's probably the best proudest moment.
I remember calling you after, and I was like in tears, and you're like, "Are you happy?" Like, I don't know, and I was like, "I don't know either. I don't think so." And you're like, "I don't understand." I was like, "I'm in a lot of pain. I can't really process much else."
Yeah, because you're upset because you came fourth. Like, I don't give
Yeah,
a shit about fourth. You know, one more in the middle.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that probably talks about that mindset with sort of we're talking about the junior swimming. Um, you can you can get a world record, but still come fourth because three other people also broke the world record. Like swimming's not fair. Like at the end of the day, I there was a when Mac Horton missed out on the Australian team because he came like third, but he swam a PB. And then everybody was sort of talking about how Mac Horton failed because he didn't make the team. It's like, but he just swam the fastest he's ever swam. You can't ask much more than that. And I think the next year he made the team because he came in the top two. And the interviewer was asking him like, "Oh, you've made some changes. You changed coach. You know, how's all this success gone?" And he was very quick to point out that he actually swam slower. this time when he made the team. He swam faster the year he missed out. So I think it's just that perspective. Like if you're after results, that's important, but at the end of the day, you can only swim as fast as you can swim. And so I guess the only unsuccessful swim would be if you kind of went over PB and didn't make a team, which is hard because everybody's at different levels. So, but yeah, if you're PB, you've done everything you can.
I remember you telling me that too.
Yeah, like so, especially getting touched out, frustrating. Should have been better, but would have been nice. Especially knowing how much crap we're gonna have to go through for the next 2 or 3 years after that with your injuries. Would have been nice to get the medal just there.
Yeah.
If you could just go back and do that, please. I think that would make things nice.
Yeah, I wish I could go back. But I remember we had the conversation before that race, and I think even in the morning. And we didn't really expect a final based on the lead-in that I'd had. It was like, well, let's just see what happens. We didn't really have any expectations going into that meet at all. It was just like, it is what it is. We just figure it out as we go. And we even discussed like pulling out of races to manage load, and even entering the meet, it was how many events do we even enter? Do we just not do a lot because we just didn't know what was going to happen, and we didn't have a lot of information at that time. And it was the lead in the morning, you're just like, well, how much pain are you willing to tolerate? Basically, was the conversation that we had. It's like, well, we can't really do any more at this stage. How much are you going to tolerate?
Yeah.
Is pretty much where we're at. And then you said that to me in the afternoon, because I think that was my last race. Was that one? That was the final wrap up for the meet, and you sort of said, well, it's the last one. Just tolerate as much as you can. I think that was the pep talk.
Yeah, wouldn't be much different from that.
No.
Absolute crazy time.
Yeah.
What's your proudest moment of yourself?
In terms of swimming, I'm assuming we're speaking of. I think looking back, that's probably pretty high up there. I don't know. I think there's snippets throughout. I think that one definitely is. I think the meet that I had literally like 3 days before I had surgery, which looking back it probably wasn't the smartest thing that we were doing, but it's the information that we had at the time, and that's all we could go on. I was pretty close to PB because it was a matter of, again, well, we're having surgery in 3 days, so it is what it is. If I'm in pain, well, it's going to be fixed in surgery in a couple of days.
They told us you couldn't do any more injuries.
Yeah, they said you can't do any more damage, so just do what you can, basically. And it was just a matter of, again, how much pain can I tolerate? And we sort of really pushed the limits, and if not exceeded the limits on that many times. I think probably as that meet leading into surgery was probably a big one. And I think also I had the mindset of that this could be my last race. Like if shit hits the fan with this surgery and it doesn't work, then I need to make this count. And I think I put a lot of pressure on that meet, but not at the same time. I think there was a lot of pressure because I'm like, well, this could be my last meet. But then I was like, oh, what the hell? Like, what's the worst that can happen? Oh, well, I'm having surgery. Like, it doesn't matter. And I think I just managed to I had the right balance going in of that mindset of this is important to me, but it also doesn't matter. I think that mindset was probably the way I went about it wasn't the right way, but I think going into it, I had that right balance. And I don't think I've been able to replicate that very well in other races. Not that I've raced a lot since then. So I think they're probably the two main ones. And then I think there's been a few sets, and probably ego speaking when I was the fastest person in the squad at the time for the 2K for quite a number of times in a row. I think it's a nice boost to the confidence.
Yes, well, we have one in 2 weeks, which you will not be swimming as is.
No.
No. I think that'd hurt the ego too much.
Yeah. Too far the other way.
I don't know if you can finish it.
Probably not.
Without pain.
Not without pain. That's probably the key word.
Yeah, and it's just not necessary, which is hard because that's something else we have to overcome. That we're doing a test set, but there's no point in you completing the test set because we know that it's not going to be very good.
No.
And not through will. It's not a willpower thing.
And I think that's also a hard thing too, is that those things where it's like, well, I could do it, but how much pain would I be in if we did it? And then it's like, okay, well, there's no point in you doing it, but watching everyone else doing it as well, and not being able to sort of gauge where we're at and managing the ego in that way. Like, I need you to do this because I need to see where we're at, but also like, this is really going to hurt my ego. This is really going to crush my confidence, and trying to find that balance of, we need to find out where you're at without pain or the smallest amount of pain that we can, but also knowing this is probably going to hurt mentally way more than it would ever hurt physically.
Is there anything you sort of learnt through managing injury, sort of about managing injuries, and then probably just, I guess, about yourself in general?
Well, yes, but being put on the spot to figure out what those things are is hard. I think I can tolerate a lot more pain than what I thought I could. And I think, and it's interesting because I think I've swum in pain for so long, I don't really know how to swim without pain. And I think it sounds a bit ridiculous, but I think I almost train better with a level of pain. And I know I've spoken to a couple other people in a similar context to this where they go to the physio to get a loosen up, but they have to time it right because if they're too loose before a race, they don't know how to swim because they're constantly training, and we're trained to perform under fatigue. That all of a sudden, when that fatigue is taken away, it's like, well, I don't know how to swim because I've never trained like this before, so therefore I don't know how to race like this. And so, because I've constantly trained in pain for such a long time now, I think I train better with pain. And that sounds really weird, but that's comfortable in a way to train with that. So yeah, I think the biggest one is I can tolerate a lot more than what I thought I could.
Do you think it's because you're not waiting for pain to kick in and you just get into that grind straight away?
I think so. I think there's definitely an element of that. It's like, oh, okay, now the pain's here. Yeah, cool. I can deal with this. Like, I now know what I'm working with. Whereas when there's no pain, it's like, okay, well, when's it going to hit? What's going to cause it? When am I going to feel it? It's going to be halfway through this and it's going to catch me off guard. Whereas, like, if it's there when I start, it's like, oh, cool, I know how to do this because I've done this for many years now. So it's just, that's my norm.
Fun.
Yeah.
And do you think, yeah, was there anything that you've sort of learned about yourself through the injury?
I don't know, not off the top of my head. I mean, probably stop recording and probably think of a whole list of things. Yeah, I don't know. I think probably just the main things are just how much I can tolerate.
Just clip it in later.
Yeah.
Really smooth edit.
Yeah.
And what's probably changed from how you used to sort of mentally prepare for a meet versus how you sort of mentally prepare for a swim session? Just training now. Is it the same process?
Oh. Um, kind of. I think, and you picked up on it pretty quick. I have like, and I think everyone does have like, not necessarily superstitions, but sort of an element of that have like this routine. And if I don't do it, then you're like, oh, something's a bit off today. And you picked up on that very quickly of like, I have this routine that I do before I race, and I always have to take my entire bag to marshalling, and I can't just take a towel and goggles like some people do because that's no, I can't do that. And I have to shake my legs and put my goggles on my face a million times and all of these things. And you can pick it if I'm nervous, whether I push my goggles on 2 million times to 1 million times to shaking my legs, not shaking my legs. Like it's very easy to sort of pick up on once you know what it is that I'm doing. If something's off or not quite right, they're really easy to pick up on. And I think I've established that routine accidentally. That wasn't an intentional routine. It was just nerves, and then I just did it because it was familiar. And I think I established a reasonably good routine physically, and having those things that I always did leading into a race. I've always had the same thing for breakfast, and I couldn't listen to music in the car on the way there because that would get stuck in my head, and depending on the pace of the song would depend on the pace that I would swim at, and I can't do that. And I know that for a race in training too. I can't have a song stuck in my head because I will swim to whatever pace that song is. So if that song is a really slow ballad, that's how slow I'm going to swim. Like it's just not going to work. And I know that when I'm doing that in training too. It's like, okay, I can't have music going close to a training session because it puts me off. A podcast or talking or engaging in those sort of things is fine. And I know, like, if we do like a time trial or something in training, it'd be a matter of talking to people up until a point, because otherwise I get too in my head. So having a distraction or something that's not related to swimming for, up until about 5 minutes before I'm about to start, or even closer. And that gap can be a bit closer within training, depending on what we're doing. I think that has been something that's really important, and something that I've really taken both from racing and training is having a level of distraction. It can't be swimming related, so I can't talk about someone else's race. It has to be something that's completely distant from swimming. Talk about that up until, particularly in training, about sort of 2 minutes before, and then it's like, okay, now I need to get in the zone. What am I going to do? And if I think too much about the time or just swimming fast, it doesn't work. I have to think about, I need to hold water. Don't overthink it. Don't try too hard, which sounds silly, but I try too hard and it doesn't come across either. So that's probably the main overlaps between the two.
I know from my football, when you talk about superstitions, I guess I had superstitions, but not because I thought that everything would go bad, but as just comfort levels. Because I know from the moment I got my first football boots when I was like 6, I had to clean and polish them every week, so they lasted longer. And then I think that, probably thinking about it just now, flowed right through to the end of my career, where every game I had my socks up and they were taped up. My socks couldn't be down. And I felt so uncomfortable if my boots were dirty before I started playing football. I hated it. I just could not stand it. I felt uncomfortable with the game. And it was distracting. I couldn't concentrate on the game. Like, I couldn't concentrate on the warm up before I started. And then I had I didn't put my shirt on until we'd done the post speech, and everybody just yells and pumps the testosterone and egos. And as the first person sort of runs out the door, that's where I pick up my jersey and put that on. And I was always the last one out. I didn't like being in the middle. Everybody just runs at different speeds, and you bump and you dodge, and I just needed to be in my own space as I ran out at the back and sort of get into the flow. And but I think my routine came because I was managing my body also with injuries for a very, very long time. So my routine, pre and post match, was dictated by how good I could make my body feel mentally and physically. To actually perform. Not that I think it ever actually mattered in the end, but at the time, during, that's what I needed. So I felt I needed for the performance.
What do you think it is that I need, and it's been a while since I've properly raced? What things do you think that you have to include in a pre-race pep talk for me to get the best out of me? What key things do you have to include in the pre-race talk?
I think the pre-race talk needs to just come back to you understanding and just I guess the confidence in your own ability to perform. I think that's probably the biggest thing. I think you're very much like, what if, what if, what if, what if? Well, you'll ask a lot of questions, but you won't answer any of those questions. And I think that's where like any of your anxious or your anxiety comes from when you're not answering. I think that's what most people get in my experience in sport, and dealing with a lot of you sort of younger, early teenagers, late teenagers, young adults, that you guys are mostly overwhelmed when you're asking a lot of questions, but you're not answering any of those questions. And I think that's for you as well. And then just bringing you back to what can you control in the race. Because I know you love that. Control what you can control. I know it's one of your like mantras and your favorite sayings.
Yeah.
But that's what I think all our race prep talks are always about, especially with your back injuries and stuff. You know, you're going to be in pain. We don't know what time you go, but you know, you can control your diet, you can control your underwater, you can control your breakout, you can control your rate, you can control your shriek count, and those sorts of things. So I think it's just always bringing you back to those things. Just race the race that you need to race, and at the end of the day, we'll see where we're at. But it also goes to whatever you warm up at is what you race. So I think all the hard work's done before then. It's just a matter of making sure you just do the race with the pep talk. One of my earliest memories of you is helping you warm up when you weren't even my athlete yet. I was just helping everybody inside. And I think you did some pace. And I was like, what the hell was that? And like, why is your rate so bloody low? It was a 50 breaths you were going to do. I was like, no, do it again. And your rate was really low. I'm like, no, like, get your rate up. And then you did it. And you finally got there. And I'm like, good. Now just go and do that in the race. And you did. You PB. And you hadn't PB for ages. And I was like, see, just stick your rate up. Like, what are you doing? Swimming's easy. Yeah, so I think which I think at the end of the day, I don't think it changes for most athletes. I think everybody's the same. I think just the trigger words are different. I think it's the same thing. It always comes back to, and swimming's very much process driven. But like I was saying with the superstitions in football, there are 36 people on the field. Like whether my socks were an inch up or an inch down does not matter. It's not going to determine whether I have a good day or not. There are so many other factors in a team sport with one ball that actually influenced me. So any of those routines and superstitions were just nonsense. Whereas you guys, you are 100% about mindset and routine because you're in a lane by yourself, unaffected by anybody else. And so I think those routines are probably way more important for you guys because they would directly relate to your performance.
But I think if you said control the controllables to me in that wording, I think I'd probably roll my eyes at you. Yeah. Whereas if I think you said, let's control the diet, let's, focus on this, and actually spelling out what those controllables are, you'd get a very different reaction from me.
Always.
Yeah.
And what's your favorite mantra for
I think I've lost track of the amount of eye rolls I think I gave you every time you said that.
Yeah. Which is a big part of your swimming career, I think. Eye rolls.
Yeah. Key criteria.
Iconic.
Yeah.
Is there anything you found that your sort of skills that you've taken from swimming and sort of started applying to your podcast?
Good question. I think there is elements of my own experiences, which I think this potentially an anxiety thing, which is a positive in a way. I think I question, am I the only one that's experiencing X, Y, Z? And in most cases, no. And so I'm sort of getting a lot of questions that I have for myself answered in that way. I think with the injury, I know I've spoken to a few people where it's like, oh, I experienced this. Did you have a similar experience? Or, there's this perceived, and a question that I ask often is this perceived persona and criteria and traits that you're supposed to have as an athlete. One of them being is strong, and because you're put up as a role model and on this pedestal, that you're sort of invincible. And then showing signs of what other people perceive as weakness or vulnerability is that are people put off doing that because of these perceptions of how you're supposed to be. And so getting people to answer those questions and be vulnerable and saying, hey, this is not a weakness, this is the reality of the situation. It's actually a strength to talk about these things because now other people feel less alone, and that makes it them okay for them to talk about too. So I think using my experiences as an athlete and what I have experienced, that a lot of those things apply to many other athletes, regardless of where they're at in their career, whether they're grassroots, junior, like intermediate, elite, to world record holders and Olympic gold medalists. And regardless of what the sport is, a lot of those experiences are the same. And I think people forget that because they're like, oh, well, they're an Olympic athlete, they have it figured out. Well, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're also just using trial and error for things, or they also find it really hard to get out of bed in the morning. They're like, I'm just not feeling, I don't want to go today. All of those same feelings that we have as a junior athlete are still there when you're a senior athlete. Just the level of it and the severity and the impact that it has varies as you progress. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've probably learnt from doing the podcast, but also just using the experiences that I've had and asking, like, hey, do you have that experience too? And quite often the answer is yes. I don't think I've come across anyone that said, no, you're on your own.
Yeah, I think my experience with football was similar to your experience for as a junior, where you used to get flogged and do more, and just be tougher. Growing up, like football changed heaps. Like, look at all the concussion protocols now. It's been 25 years since I played my first game of football. I got knocked out like 3 or 4 times in my career. I got hit in the head a lot. But that mentality of just tough it out, shake it off, it's common through there. Only once did I get knocked out and not get let back on the field. And I got knocked out by my best mate's brother, who was playing on the opposite team. He just kneed me in the head. And then they helped me off the field, took me in the club rooms. I wanted to go back on. They said, no, you're being aggressive. So I was upset that they wouldn't let me back on. And they're like, that's a sign of concussion. And I remember arguing with them, like, well, if you let me back on, I won't be aggressive. So therefore I won't have concussion. Like, and so they took my clothes from me, and I was just standing naked in the club rooms because they thought that I wouldn't go back on the field if I was naked. So I got hit in the head pretty hard. But it's that mentality of he's got to tough it out, push through injury. Injuries are only temporary, um, and it's that putting your body on the line, which happens so often, where you just cop hits, and it's just part of football where it's protecting your teammates, putting your body on the ball, putting your body in between, which I think has probably changed a lot now in football. Not that I've been involved in a lot more, but I guess something that I pushed through my injuries because I never felt comfortable. I was very injury prone from 18 onwards when football actually mattered. And so I know from my experience with injuries, I know my body wasn't good and I couldn't mentally and emotionally push myself through those injuries because I know it was causing damage. And so it was always a matter of like, all right, well, how can I work this so that I'm not going to keep pushing it through? But it also comes across as I'm not wimping out. Like, how can I protect myself physically and my reputation at the same time? And yeah, so that just grinding through injuries, I guess, is common amongst most sports.
I think the biggest, in quotations, injury that I had probably growing up was I tore my hamstring. And I did that whilst at swim training in our sort of dry land that we did. And I remember feeling it go, like that popping sensation. I remember feeling it. I was like, oh, I don't think that's supposed to happen. And I was too scared to say anything. I was like, if I say something, they're going to just have a go at me and say, no, you're just wimping out. as you say. And so I didn't. And so I continued to do squats on a torn hamstring, and I probably tore it even further than what I initially done it because I was too scared to say anything. And I remember limping out of training because I couldn't even walk. It was that bad. And calling my physio, being like, I think I've done something to my hamstring. I can't even walk. And I remember being in bed, icing on and off for the entire weekend until I could get into the physio when we went back. Because as you say, you just keep going. You don't have another option.
No, not ideal.
No, I don't recommend it. If it hurts, please say something.
Yeah. Well, it's just not productive too, at the end of the day.
It was no pain, no gain, was sort of the motto.
Which I heard this recently. That saying needs to be edited to no train, no pain, no gain.
Mm,
So if you got pain and you're not training, then you're not creating the correct pain.
yeah.
So step one is you need to be training. And
Yeah.
so if anything is stopping you from training, it's negative.
Yep.
So, is there anything that you've sort of picked up whilst doing the podcast from any of the people you've had on here that you've sort of applied to yourself as an athlete?
Oh, there's a lot of things. I think there's bits and pieces that I can take from every athlete that I've spoken to. I think the biggest one is it's actually really comforting listening to different athletes. And lucky enough that I've spoken to athletes outside of Australia now as well, in the sense that we all have a lot of similar experiences. Like I'm nowhere close to the level that they're at, but the mentality and the experiences they've had is not vastly different. Like it's a lot closer to home than sort of what I anticipated. So it's the biggest one is it's really comforting and really reassuring to hear that okay, so they're going through it too. Like I remember speaking to, specifically Lani Pallister, and when she was doing a particular set and she stuffed up, one or two of the 400s out of 10, and the others were spot on and sort of close to PB. And she was upset that she stuffed up the entire set because of those one or two. And it's like, well, actually, hang on a second. What about the other 8 or 9 that you did that were spot on, if not better? And I've had that mindset, and I still do. And I catch myself, and probably not often enough do I catch myself in that mindset that like I stuffed up one, so the whole set's ruined. And I'm sure you've witnessed that many times. And I'm like, what about this one? You're like, but what about this one that you did really well? I'm like, no, it doesn't count because this one was really bad. Or I do a good time, and you're like, are you happy with that? And I'm like, no, because it was a fluke, because there's only one of them. I have to be able to do it again. And I still say that now.
You said it this morning.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't we doing enough speed? Like this split was the fastest split you've done in
Yeah.
months. It's like, well, why do we need to do that if what we're doing is working? Like this result was good.
Yeah. And even I look at, again, what we sort of touched on before, when I was disappointed that I got touched out and got fourth, when Ali Cole said that she did, I think it was 400 freestyle. Hopefully I'm not quoting it incorrectly on that. And she got silver and she did a PB, and she went back to the teammates, and the teammates like, oh, like you must be so disappointed you didn't win. She's like, why? I just got to stand on the dais, I got a medal, and I did a PB. Like there's nothing wrong. I did everything I could. If that girl that came first wasn't there, then I would have won. But I did a PB and I did everything I could and I executed the race perfectly. So I have nothing to be upset about. That actually really happened. But there's this perception of you came second, you didn't win. So there's so many more things that I can pull from different people, but yeah, I think there's those two things that probably stuck with me the most out of all of it. But there is an element of comfort, as I said, and reassurance that I get from every episode that I'm not alone. And that's the idea of the whole purpose of the podcast in the first place, is to create that safe place where athletes can open up about their experience, good, bad, and everything in between. And I feel comfort and reassurance. And so I'm hoping I'm creating those same feelings for other people that are listening, that they're not alone. Other people are experiencing it too, and having those conversations are really important and can be really beneficial.
It is funny when you talk about like that, sort of putting things into perspective and the Like, all right, what can we do? It's like, so Mobile, who's been on the podcast before, obviously swims nationally for the Maldives, as you know, and so I've been to Korea with him at World Champs. So that's obviously the peak uh, event for the year. That's not Olympic year. And I remember being nervous on the way over there about how he's going to perform and what we're going to do and all that other sort of stuff. And we literally got to deck on the first day, and I was like, oh, it's just swimming. Like it's no different. We're doing the exact same thing as we are at our little school pool that we use in the afternoons, or at the Iguanu at the Olympic pool. Um, it was just that perspective of like, oh, it's still just swimming. I'm not doing anything different. So it's kind of funny when it's I guess the anxiety always just comes down to what pressure you put on it.
And I think that was a conversation I had with Zach Somebody Cook when he was on, is that, um, how many 200s breaststroke have I swum in my lifetime? I've lost count. Like, it's literally like I've done this so many times before. It's just another one. And I know I've spoken to some of the younger athletes, even just within that club, and they rock up to states for the first time, like, oh, it just looks like any other meet. It's like, yeah, it's literally the same. Just the title of the meet has changed, and yes, there's finals now, and there's not a normal meet, but yeah, it looks exactly the same. Like, you're still swimming in the same pool that you've swum in a million times. You're doing the same race that you've done, countless times in training at a meet before. Just the name of the meet has changed, and the level of importance you've put on the meet has changed.
It really is. And like we spoke about before, you just have to swim your race. Like that at the end of the day. I think that's your benefit. In contrast to football, where there's 18 different guys on the other field, on the field against you, and the 18 players that you're playing with might not be the same 18. So there's huge variance every week. The field changes, the weather changes, the umpires change, the crowd changes. You guys are swimming in a lane with water in it, probably the same temperature every week. You're wearing your race bathers, you're wearing the same equipment. Like, there's very little variable other than how much pressure you put on yourself. That's probably the only variable. That's probably the biggest variable for most of you. Is I'm swimming my first meet of the season where I'm unfit and my expectations are low, or is it the end of the season? It's my last chance to race properly. Like, you're still swimming in the same pool, especially in Victoria. You're still swimming in EBSAC, but how much pressure do I put on myself? Is probably the big more of a variable than anything else in swimming. That mental side of things.
Yeah.
Just be better.
Just be better.
Yeah. Hey, if you guys are just better, then everything will work out fine.
Yeah, it's just that simple.
It is. It is. I'm a very good coach, as people can tell.
Yeah. Well, I think we've pretty much answered all of the questions that I can think of from a coach athlete perspective, unless you have any other questions.
What's your most enjoyable set?
Oh, it varies. I think it depends on the mindset that I'm in. My favorite set used to be this set that my old coach used to give us every now and again. And everyone else hated it. And for whatever reason, I loved it. And I don't know why. Looking at it now, I'm like, I don't know why I like that set, because that's not a fun set. And it's 400 and 4 100s, 850s, 300, 3 ones, 350s, 200, 2 ones, 250s, 100, 100, 250s. And I, for whatever reason, I just loved it. That used to be my all-time favorite set. And then before that, coach, my favorite set that we used to do, and it's a very small set. It was 450s max on like a minute 30. You get a little bit of a cool off, and you do it 3 times. That's how but now I don't know. It's more mood dependent than anything. Depending, like sometimes I'm like, I just want to swim and just not think, and I just want to swim up and down and give me a really hard aerobic set. I think it's not really set based now. I think it's more of the high I get after is what I'm looking for. I want a set that is going to give me that satisfaction that I did something really hard. But it has to be within reason. Like if you set it too hard, I'm like, no, that's too hard, I can't do it. It has to be like hard, but still within like that I can actually do
So everyone can hear what I'm dealing with.
it. I just need the high.
Yeah.
I've done well.
Yeah.
It's a very small window.
Just a hormone addict.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any sets you absolutely hate?
Anything butterfly. Or
No, you picked butterfly the other day.
yeah.
Yeah. See? That's what I'm dealing with.
Breath hold. No, I hate breath hold so much. I refuse to do it. And thankfully, my ribs have not allowed me to be able to do it properly for quite some time. And that has been the biggest win of this injury ever because I've always hated it. Also, I don't really like kick sets. And also, that has been a pro of being injured is that I don't have too many kick sets, if any.
Well, your ability to kick and your ability to hold your breath both indicate that you don't like them.
Yeah, they're not very good.
Unfortunately, as a breaststroker,
Mm,
not good.
no, it's not a great combo.
No. Especially short course breaststroke.
Yeah. There are weak points before injury, and then not being able to do them because of injury. They're very, very low down.
Did you not enjoy them, so you didn't train them? Or did you train them and you just weren't very good at them?
I think there's a level of both. I think I had to train them because I was too scared not to. I would barely say a word growing up in training because I was too scared. So I just did it and I hated it. And I wasn't very good at it. And I remember with one of my coaches, we would spend every Friday morning practicing my freestyle kick because it's atrocious. And we would spend every Friday morning for half a session, so an hour on my freestyle kick. We did that for like 2 months and we tested it at the start of what my 100 free kick time was and we tested it at the end and we dropped about half a second. And he's like, I give up. And so I just never had to do freestyle kick again after that because he's like, it's not going anywhere. It's not improving. I don't know what's wrong with it. We're not doing it anymore. And so I didn't have to do it. And that was the same with my butterfly. He hated the way my butterfly looked. He's like, I don't want to see you. He's like, I don't even want to watch you swim butterfly anymore. So anytime there's a butterfly set, I got to do breaststroke. That's where I was at.
Perfect.
And I'd be used as a bad example. Like this is what not to do. And it's like Renee can use it. And I was used as the bad example.
Well, it's also always important to have a bad example.
Apparently.
Well, we haven't done butterfly for a while, so
We don't need to bring it back.
we'll do it for a while. You have a butterfly draw on your pool boy.
Yeah. We don't need to bring it back there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think it's everything for me.
That's good. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. I think we talked a lot.
We did.
Hopefully,
Covered a lot of boxes.
hopefully answered some of the questions you asked.
Yeah. I think so.
That's good.
Definitely ticks a lot of boxes.
Excellent. That's what we want.
Yeah. And hopefully anyone that's listening has actually gotten something out of it. Just not just switched off and like, I exited out of this, I'm not listening to it anymore.
I'm pretty interesting, so.
Well, that's good then. That's lucky.